The air in the funeral home smelled like lilies and furniture polish, that strange combination that makes your throat tighten even before the grief fully hits. I stood there in my black dress, the fabric scratching against my collarbone, watching the last few mourners file past my mother's casket. The room felt too warm, the kind of heat that comes from too many bodies packed into a space designed for sorrow. My brother Marcus stood beside me, his cologne mixing with the floral scent until I felt dizzy. His hand gripped my shoulder, fingers pressing too hard through the thin material of my dress. Nobody tells you how exhausting it is to smile at strangers who claim they knew your mother. How your face starts to ache from holding that expression of grateful acknowledgement. How your feet throb in shoes you only wear to weddings and funerals. The carpet beneath us was burgundy and worn, the kind that has absorbed decades of tears and hushed conversations. My sister Diane arrived late, as always. I heard her heels clicking against the hardwood in the hallway before I saw her. That distinctive rhythm, quick and purposeful, like she was annoyed at having to be there at all. When she finally appeared in the doorway, her hair was perfect, not a strand out of place despite the October wind that had been rattling the windows all morning. She wore sunglasses inside, which seemed ridiculous until she took them off and I saw her eyes were red and swollen. Marcus released my shoulder and moved toward her. I watched them embrace, heard the rustle of her coat, smelled her perfume, something expensive and floral that our mother would have loved. They whispered to each other, heads bent close, and something about their posture made my stomach clench. There was an intimacy there, a shared secret perhaps, that excluded me entirely. The funeral director, a thin man with papery skin and gentle hands, approached me with a clipboard. His voice was soft, practiced, the voice of someone who has delivered bad news and logistical details 1,000 times. He needed signatures, he explained. Decisions about the burial plot, the headstone, the final arrangements. My father had died 3 years earlier, and we had buried him in the family plot at Riverside Cemetery. My mother would rest beside him now, just as she had always wanted. I took the clipboard, felt the cool metal against my palm, and tried to focus on the words swimming before my eyes. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, a sound I had not noticed until that moment. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching myself from somewhere far away. That evening, we gathered at my parents' house. Our house, really, though I had not lived there in 15 years. The moment I stepped through the front door, I was overwhelmed by the scent of my mother's lavender sachets, the one she tucked into every drawer and closet. The house felt empty despite the 3 of us being there, as if the walls themselves knew she was gone. Marcus headed straight for the kitchen. I heard the refrigerator open, the clink of bottles, the hiss of a beer being opened. Diane dropped her purse on the hall table with a heavy thud and kicked off her heels. They landed on the hardwood with 2 distinct clacks. I stood in the entryway, unable to move, staring at the family photos lining the wall. My mother's face smiled at me from a dozen different frames, frozen in moments of happiness I could barely remember. "We need to talk," Marcus called from the kitchen. His voice had an edge to it, something sharp and urgent that made my pulse quicken. I found him sitting at the kitchen table, the same oak table where we had eaten countless meals as children. Diane was already there, perched on the edge of her chair like she might bolt at any moment. The overhead light cast harsh shadows across their faces. Marcus had a manila folder in front of him, thick with papers. "What is that?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Part of me had been waiting for this moment since the funeral director first mentioned the will. Marcus looked at Diane, then back at me. His jaw was tight, muscles working beneath the skin. Mom's will, he said. We need to go through it. I pulled out a chair and sat down. The wood was cool beneath my hands. Outside, I could hear the wind picking up, branches scraping against the kitchen window. The sound was like fingernails on glass, insistent and unsettling. Diane reached across the table and flipped open the folder. The papers inside were crisp and white, covered in dense legal text. I recognized our mother's signature at the bottom of the first page, the distinctive looping handwriting that had signed permission slips and birthday cards and Christmas presents for decades. It is pretty straightforward, Diane said. Her voice was flat, emotionless, like she was reading a grocery list. The house goes to Marcus. The investment accounts are split between the three of us. Her jewelry comes to me. The car goes to you, Claire. I stared at her. That is it, I asked. That is all she left me? A 10-year-old sedan? Marcus shifted in his chair. The leather of his belt creaked. There's also some cash, he said. About $20,000, split 3 ways. I felt something cold settle in my chest. My mother had been a careful woman, meticulous about money. She and my father had both worked good jobs, had saved and invested wisely. They had owned this house outright for 20 years. The idea that her entire estate amounted to some jewelry, a car, and $60,000 seemed impossible. What about the lake house? I asked. What about Dad's life insurance? What about the stocks he left her? Diane and Marcus exchanged another look, and that cold feeling in my chest spread through my entire body. The lake house was sold 2 years ago, Marcus said. Mom needed the money for medical expenses. She had Medicare, I said. My voice was rising, echoing off the kitchen walls. She had supplemental insurance. What medical expenses? Diane closed the folder with a snap that made me flinch. Look, Claire, she said, and her tone was patronizing, the way she used to talk to me when we were kids and she was explaining something she thought I was too young to understand. Mom had a lot of expenses in her final years. The money went where it needed to go. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor, a harsh screech that set my teeth on edge. This does not make sense, I said. None of this makes sense. Marcus rubbed his face with both hands. I heard the scratch of his palm against his 5 o'clock shadow. We are all tired, he said. Let us table this for tonight. We can meet with the lawyer next week and go through everything properly. But I could not let it go. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and I could feel it in my bones the way you feel a storm coming. Who is the executor? I asked. Marcus looked up at me. His eyes were bloodshot, whether from grief or the beer or something else, I could not tell. I am, he said. Of course you are, I heard myself say. Of course it is you. I left the house that night with my mother's will burning a hole in my mind. I drove through the dark streets of our hometown, past the high school where we had all graduated, past the diner where my father used to take us for pancakes on Sunday mornings, past the library where my mother had worked for 30 years. The streetlights cast orange pools on the wet pavement. It had started to rain, a cold October rain that matched my mood perfectly. My apartment felt small and cramped after the spaciousness of my parents' house. I lived in a 1-bedroom place above a bakery, and the smell of bread and cinnamon usually comforted me. That night, it made me nauseous. I poured myself a glass of wine, felt the cool stem of the glass between my fingers, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from my best friend Rachel. How are you holding up? I stared at the screen, at those 4 simple words, and felt tears prick my eyes. I did not know how to answer. How do you explain to someone that your grief has been hijacked by suspicion? That you cannot properly mourn your mother because you are too busy wondering if your siblings are lying to you? I set the phone down without responding and opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the darkness of my living room. I pulled up my email and started searching through old messages from my mother. She had not been particularly tech-savvy, but she had learned to email in her later years, and we had exchanged messages regularly. I found one from 8 months ago. The subject line read, "Just checking in." I opened it, and my mother's voice seemed to speak from the screen. "Hi, sweetheart," she had written. "I hope you are doing well. I have been thinking about you a lot lately. There are some things I need to talk to you about, important things about the future. Can you come visit soon? I love you so much. Mom." I remembered receiving that email. I had been swamped at work, in the middle of a big project that had consumed all my time and energy. I had responded that I would try to visit soon, but I never did. 2 weeks later, my mother had her first stroke. By the time I made it home, she was in the hospital, unable to speak clearly, her right side paralyzed. She had lingered for 6 more months, in and out of consciousness, before the second stroke took her. I sat there in the darkness, the laptop screen the only light, and wondered what she had wanted to tell me. What important things about the future had she needed to discuss? The next morning, I called the law office of Henderson and Associates. That was the firm my parents had always used, the one that had handled my father's will and estate. A receptionist answered, her voice bright and professional. I explained who I was, that my mother had recently passed, that I needed to speak with someone about her will. There was a pause, the sound of typing, then the receptionist came back on the line. "I am sorry for your loss," she said, and she sounded like she meant it. "Let me transfer you to Mr. Henderson." The hold music was classical, something soft and inoffensive. I paced my small living room, phone pressed to my ear, counting my steps. 5 steps to the window, 5 steps back. The bakery below was busy, and I could hear the muffled sounds of customers and conversation through the floor. "Claire," a man's voice said, warm and familiar. "This is Robert Henderson. I was so sorry to hear about your mother. She was a wonderful woman." "Thank you," I said. "Mr. Henderson, I need to ask you about my mother's will." "Of course," he said. "What questions do you have?" I took a deep breath. "My brother showed me a copy last night. It seems like there should be more to the estate than what is listed. I was wondering if you could help me understand." There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing, could almost picture him in his office, probably sitting behind the same massive desk he had had for decades. "Claire," he said slowly, "I did not prepare your mother's will." "What?" I said. "But you have always been our family lawyer." "I was," he agreed. "I handled your father's estate. But about 2 years ago, your mother came to see me. She said she wanted to make some changes, and she asked me to recommend another attorney. I gave her several names. I do not know which one she chose." My heart was pounding now, so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Why would she do that?" I asked. "Why would she switch lawyers?" "I cannot say," Mr. Henderson replied. Attorney-client privilege prevents me from discussing the details of our conversation. But Claire, if you have concerns about your mother's will, you have every right to request a copy from the probate court. It is a public document once it is filed. I thanked him and ended the call. My hands were shaking. I set the phone down on the coffee table and stared at it like it might explode. My mother had switched lawyers. She had deliberately gone to someone new, someone our family did not know. Why? What had she been trying to hide? Or what had she been trying to protect? I spent the rest of the morning on the phone with the county probate court. The clerk I spoke with was patient but firm. The will had not been filed yet, she explained. The executor had 30 days to file after the death. Until it was filed, I could not access it through the court. Who was the executor? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Marcus Brennan, she confirmed. I called Marcus 6 times that day. Each time, it went straight to voicemail. His outgoing message was brief and impersonal. You have reached Marcus Brennan. Leave a message. I did not leave a message. What would I say? I know you are hiding something. I know Mom switched lawyers and did not tell anyone. It sounded paranoid, even to me. That evening, I drove to Marcus's house. He lived in a nice neighborhood on the north side of town, the kind of place with manicured lawns and 2-car garages. His house was a colonial style, painted gray with white trim. Lights glowed in the windows, warm and inviting. I could see shadows moving inside. I parked on the street and walked up the driveway. The concrete was smooth beneath my feet. Someone had planted mums along the walkway, deep burgundy and golden yellow, their petals just starting to brown at the edges. I rang the doorbell and heard it chime inside, a pleasant 2-note melody. Marcus's wife Jennifer answered. She was a small woman with kind eyes and a quick smile. When she saw me, her expression shifted to something like pity. Claire, she said, pulling me into a hug before I could protest. I am so sorry about your mom. Come in, come in. The house smelled like dinner, something with garlic and tomatoes. My stomach growled despite my anxiety. Jennifer led me through the foyer into the living room. The furniture was expensive, leather and dark wood. Family photos covered every surface. I saw my niece and nephew frozen in various stages of childhood, their faces bright with joy. Marcus is in his study, Jennifer said. Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Wine? I am fine, I said. I just need to talk to Marcus. She nodded, her smile faltering slightly. He has been really stressed, she said quietly. This whole thing with your mom, it has been hard on him. I wanted to say that it had been hard on all of us, that grief was not a competition, but I bit my tongue. Jennifer disappeared down the hallway, and I heard her knock on a door, heard the murmur of voices. Marcus appeared a moment later. He looked tired, his shirt wrinkled, his hair standing up like he had been running his hands through it. Claire, he said. What are you doing here? We need to talk, I said. About Mom's will. About why she switched lawyers. About what you are not telling me. His face went carefully blank. I do not know what you are talking about. I stood up, felt my hands curl into fists at my sides. Do not lie to me, Marcus. I called Mr. Henderson. He told me Mom went to a different attorney 2 years ago. Why would she do that? What was she hiding? Marcus glanced toward the hallway where Jennifer had disappeared. Keep your voice down, he said. The kids are doing homework. Then tell me the truth, I said, but quieter. Please, Marcus. I deserve to know what is going on. He sank into the armchair across from me, and for a moment he looked old. Older than his 42 years. He rubbed his eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was heavy with exhaustion. Mom did not want you to know, he said. Know what? I asked. He looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. Guilt. Deep, profound guilt. She was angry with you, he said. After Dad died, you barely came home. You missed holidays, birthdays. You were always too busy with work, with your life in the city. It hurt her, Claire. It really hurt her. I felt like I had been slapped. That is not fair, I said. I came home when I could. I called her every week. I sent cards and gifts. It was not enough, Marcus said flatly. Not for her. She felt abandoned. So when she redid her will, she decided to leave most of the estate to Diane and me. We were the ones who were there, who visited regularly, who took care of her when she got sick. The room seemed to tilt. I grabbed the arm of the sofa to steady myself. How much? I asked. How much did she leave you? Marcus would not meet my eyes. The house is worth about $400,000, he said. The investment accounts total around $600,000. There was also a life insurance policy, another $200,000. I did the math in my head. $1.2 million. And I was getting a car and $6,000. You have got to be kidding me, I said. She made her choice, Marcus said. I am sorry, Claire. I really am. But this is what she wanted. I left his house in a daze. The night air was cold against my face, sharp and biting. I sat in my car for a long time, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what I had just learned. My mother had cut me out of her will. My mother, who had raised me, who had taught me to read and ride a bike and balance a checkbook, had decided I was not worth leaving anything to. The grief that hit me then was different from the grief I had felt at the funeral. This was sharper, more personal. It was not just the loss of my mother, but the loss of who I thought she was. Who I thought we were to each other. I drove home on autopilot, barely aware of the roads or the other cars. When I got back to my apartment, I poured another glass of wine and sat in the darkness, letting the tears come. They were hot and angry, streaming down my face, dripping off my chin. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen and there were no tears left. Then I got angry. The anger was cleaner than the grief, more focused. It burned through me like fire, consuming everything else. I opened my laptop again and started researching. I read about wills and estates, about probate law, about what rights beneficiaries had. I learned that children could contest a will if they believed their parent was not of sound mind when it was written, or if they suspected undue influence. Undue influence. The word stuck in my mind. My mother had been sick for the last 6 months of her life. She had been vulnerable, depended on others for her care. And who had been taking care of her? Marcus and Diane. I thought about that look they had exchanged at the funeral, the way they had whispered together, excluding me. I thought about how quickly Marcus had produced the will, how Diane had seemed to already know its contents. I thought about my mother's email, the one where she said she needed to talk to me about important things. What if she had not wanted to cut me out? What if someone had convinced her to? What if the will Marcus had shown me was not the real one? The thought was like a lightning bolt. I sat up straight, my heart racing. What if there was another will? An earlier one that my mother had written before she got sick, before Marcus and Diane had gotten to her. I grabbed my phone and called Diane. It was late, almost 11, but I did not care. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Claire? What is wrong?" "I need to ask you something," I said. "When did Mom change her will?" There was a pause. I heard rustling, like she was sitting up in bed. "What are you talking about?" "Marcus told me," I said. "He told me that Mom cut me out of the will because I did not visit enough. I want to know when she made that decision." Diane sighed, a long exhale that crackled through the phone. "Claire, it is late. Can we talk about this tomorrow?" "No," I said. "We cannot. I want to know now. When did she change the will?" Another pause. I could hear her breathing, could imagine her calculating what to say. "About 18 months ago," she finally said. "She called me and Marcus to the house and told us what she was planning. She said she had already met with a lawyer." 18 months ago, I repeated. "That was before her first stroke." "Yes," Diane said. "Before she got sick." But that did not make sense. 18 months ago, my mother had been healthy and active. She had been volunteering at the library, taking water aerobics classes, going to book club. Why would she suddenly decide to cut me out of her will? Did she say why? I asked. Did she explain her reasoning? Diane was quiet for a long moment. "She said you had made your priorities clear," she finally said. "That you had chosen your career over your family." She was hurt, Claire. You have to understand that. I felt the anger flare again, hot and bright. "I had a job," I said. "I had responsibilities. I could not just drop everything and come running every time she wanted me to." "That is exactly the attitude she was talking about," Diane said, and now her voice had an edge to it. "You always put yourself first. Even now, even after she is gone, you are making this about you." I hung up on her. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I wanted to throw something, to scream, to break things. Instead, I forced myself to breathe, to think. Something was not right. I could feel it in my gut, that instinct that tells you when someone is lying. Diane and Marcus were hiding something, and I was going to find out what. The next morning, I called in sick to work. My boss was understanding. "Take all the time you need," she said. "I know this must be incredibly difficult." If only she knew. I drove to the county clerk's office as soon as it opened. The building was old, with high ceilings and marble floors that echoed with every footstep. I found the records department on the second floor, a cramped room filled with filing cabinets and the smell of old paper. The clerk was a middle-aged woman with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She looked up when I approached, her expression professionally neutral. "How can I help you?" she asked. "I need to find out who my mother used as her attorney," I said. "She passed away recently, and I am trying to locate her will." The clerk nodded sympathetically. "Do you have her full name and date of death?" I provided the information, and she turned to her computer. Her fingers clicked across the keyboard, the sound sharp in the quiet room. After a moment, she frowned. I am not seeing anything filed yet, she said. Are you sure the will has been submitted to probate? It has not been filed yet, I said. But I was hoping you might have records of attorney-client relationships, or maybe property transfers. She shook her head. We would not have that information unless it was part of a public filing. You might try calling local law firms, or checking with the State Bar Association. I thanked her and left, feeling frustrated. This was going to be harder than I thought. I spent the rest of the day calling every law firm in town. Most of them would not give me any information, citing client confidentiality. A few were sympathetic but unhelpful. By 5 o'clock, I had exhausted my list and was no closer to finding answers. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of the last law office, my head resting on the steering wheel, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Claire Brennan? A woman's voice asked. Yes, I said. Who is this? My name is Patricia Odom. I am an attorney here in town. I heard you have been calling around asking about your mother's will. My pulse quickened. Yes, I said. Did you represent her? I did, Patricia said. And I think we need to talk. Can you come to my office? I was there in 15 minutes. Patricia Odom's office was in a small building near the courthouse, the kind of place that looked like it had been there forever. The waiting room had outdated magazines and a coffee maker that looked like it was from the 1980s. Patricia herself was in her 60s, with steel gray hair and sharp blue eyes. She shook my hand firmly and led me into her office. The room was lined with law books, and her desk was covered with neat stacks of files. Thank you for seeing me, I said, sitting in the chair across from her desk. She settled into her own chair and folded her hands on the desk. Claire, she said, I want to be upfront with you. I cannot discuss the details of my representation of your mother without violating attorney-client privilege. However, there are some things I can tell you, and I think you need to hear them. I leaned forward. Please, I said. Anything you can tell me would help. Patricia took a deep breath. Your mother came to see me about 2 years ago. She wanted to update her will. We had several meetings, and I prepared a document according to her wishes. She signed it in my office, with my paralegal and secretary as witnesses. Okay, I said. What did it say? Patricia shook her head. I cannot tell you that. But what I can tell you is this. About 6 months later, your mother called me. She was very upset. She said that her children, specifically your brother and sister, were pressuring her to change the will. She said they were telling her that you did not care about her, that you had abandoned the family. She wanted to know if she should make changes. My breath caught. What did you tell her? I told her that it was her decision, Patricia said. But I also told her that she should not make changes based on pressure from others. I advised her to think carefully about what she really wanted, and to consider whether the people influencing her had their own interests at heart. Did she change it? I asked. Patricia looked at me for a long moment. She came back to see me one more time, about a year ago. She seemed different, more frail. She said she wanted to make some revisions. I prepared a new draft, but she never signed it. She said she needed more time to think. So the original will is still valid, I said. Patricia nodded slowly. As far as I know, yes. Unless she went to another attorney and created a new will, the one she signed in my office 2 years ago, is her last valid will. I felt dizzy. Do you still have a copy? I asked. I do, Patricia said. And I will be filing it with the probate court next week. Next week, I repeated. But Marcus is the executor. He is supposed to file it. Patricia's expression hardened. Your brother came to see me 3 days ago. He brought a will that he claimed was your mother's most recent. He asked me to destroy my copy and file his instead. Oh my God, I whispered. I refused, of course, Patricia said. I told him that I had a legal and ethical obligation to file the will that I had prepared and witnessed. He became quite angry. He threatened to sue me for malpractice, said I had unduly influenced your mother. I told him to leave my office. What is in the real will? I asked. Please, I need to know. Patricia hesitated, then reached into her desk drawer. She pulled out a thick envelope and slid it across the desk to me. Normally, I would not do this, she said. But given the circumstances, I think you have a right to know what your mother actually wanted. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a legal document, multiple pages stapled together. I scanned the first page, then the second, my eyes moving faster and faster as I read. The house was to be sold, with the proceeds split equally among the three of us. The investment accounts were to be divided equally. The life insurance was to be divided equally. Everything was equal, fair, exactly what you would expect from a parent who loved all their children the same. But there was more. On the third page, there was a letter, handwritten in my mother's distinctive script. It was dated 2 years ago, right around the time she had first met with Patricia. To my children, it began. I am writing this to explain my wishes and to make sure there is no confusion after I am gone. I love all three of you equally. You are my greatest joy and my proudest accomplishment. I want my estate divided fairly among you because each of you deserves to be taken care of. Marcus, you have always been responsible and steady. I trust you to help your sisters navigate the legal process. Diane, you have always been strong and independent. I admire your determination. Claire, you have always been ambitious and driven. I am so proud of the life you have built for yourself. I know that sometimes you feel guilty for not being here more often, Claire. I want you to know that I understand. I raised you to chase your dreams, and that is exactly what you have done. Never apologize for that. Your father and I always wanted you to have opportunities we never had. The fact that you took those opportunities and made something of yourself makes me happier than you can imagine. I hope that after I am gone, the three of you will stay close. Support each other. Love each other. Do not let money or possessions come between you. Family is all that matters in the end. I love you all so much. Mom. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. This was my mother. This was the woman who had raised me, who had encouraged me to apply to college out of state, who had been so proud when I got my first real job. This was the mother I remembered. What happened? I asked Patricia. How did Marcus get a different will? Patricia leaned back in her chair. I can only speculate, she said. But based on what your mother told me, I believe your brother and sister convinced her that you did not care about the family. They may have taken her to another attorney, someone who did not know her, and had a new will drawn up. If she was already starting to show signs of cognitive decline, she may not have fully understood what she was signing. Can we prove that? I asked. Can we challenge the will Marcus has? We can try, Patricia said. I will file the will I have, and we can contest the other one. It will likely go to court. It will be expensive and time-consuming, and it will probably destroy what is left of your relationship with your siblings. I looked down at my mother's letter, at her handwriting, at the words "I love you all so much." I thought about Marcus and Diane, about how they had looked at each other at the funeral, about how they had lied to me. I thought about my mother, vulnerable and sick, being manipulated by her own children. Do it, I said. File the will. I want to fight this. The next week was a blur of phone calls and meetings. Patricia filed my mother's will with the probate court, and within 24 hours, Marcus filed his competing will. The court scheduled a hearing to determine which will was valid. I hired my own attorney, a sharp woman named Linda Chen who specialized in estate litigation. She had a reputation for being aggressive and thorough, exactly what I needed. We met in her office, a sleek modern space with glass walls and minimalist furniture. This is going to get ugly, Linda warned me. Your siblings are not going to back down easily. Are you prepared for that? I nodded. I have to do this, I said. Not just for the money, but for my mother. She deserves to have her real wishes honored. Linda smiled grimly. Then let us get to work. We started gathering evidence. Linda subpoenaed my mother's medical records from the last 2 years of her life. We discovered that she had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia 6 months before she supposedly signed the will that Marcus was trying to probate. Her doctor had noted in his records that she was experiencing confusion and memory loss, that she sometimes did not recognize family members. We also found records of multiple visits to a neurologist, someone my mother had been seeing regularly. I had not known about any of this. Marcus and Diane had never mentioned it. Why did not they tell me? I asked Linda. Why did not anyone tell me she was sick? Linda looked at me over her reading glasses. Because if you had known, you would have come home. You would have been involved in her care. And that would have made it much harder for them to manipulate her. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They had deliberately kept me in the dark. They had isolated my mother from me so they could control her. We also tracked down the attorney who had prepared Marcus's will. His name was Gerald Finch, and he worked out of a small office in a strip mall on the edge of town. Linda and I went to see him together. Gerald Finch was a nervous man with thinning hair and a habit of adjusting his tie. When we walked into his office, he looked like he wanted to run. Linda did not waste time with pleasantries. Mr. Finch, she said, sitting down across from his desk without being invited. I represent Claire Brennan. I understand you prepared a will for her mother, Dorothy Brennan, approximately 1 year ago. Finch swallowed hard. I cannot discuss my clients, he said. Dorothy Brennan is deceased, Linda said. And there is a question about whether she had the mental capacity to execute a will at the time you prepared it. I am going to subpoena your records, Mr. Finch. But I thought I would give you the opportunity to cooperate voluntarily. Finch looked between us, his face pale. I did not know, he said finally. I swear I did not know she was not competent. Tell me what happened, Linda said, her voice softer now. Finch took a deep breath. Her son and daughter brought her in. They said she wanted to update her will. She seemed a little confused, but she was able to answer my questions. She said she wanted to leave most of her estate to her son and daughter because they had been taking care of her. I prepared the will according to her instructions. Did you ask about her other daughter? Linda asked. Did you ask about Claire? Finch nodded. She said Claire had moved away and did not visit. She seemed sad about it. Her son, Marcus, he was very insistent that this was what she wanted. He said she had been talking about it for months. Did you have her evaluated by a doctor? Linda asked. Did you take any steps to ensure she had the capacity to execute the will? Finch looked down at his desk. No, he admitted. I should have. I know that now. But she seemed lucid enough, and her children were there supporting her decision. I did not think there was a problem. Linda stood up. You are going to be hearing from me, she said. And I strongly suggest you get your own attorney. We left Finch's office, and I felt a grim satisfaction. We had him. We had proof that my mother had been confused, that she had been brought to an attorney by Marcus and Diane, that no one had properly evaluated her mental state. But the satisfaction was short-lived. That evening, Marcus called me. His voice was cold, controlled. You need to drop this, Claire, he said. I am not dropping anything, I replied. Mom wanted her estate split equally. That is what is going to happen. You are tearing this family apart, he said. Is that what you want? To destroy everything over money? This is not about money, I said, my voice rising. This is about you and Diane lying to me. This is about you manipulating Mom when she was sick and vulnerable. This is about you stealing from me. We did not steal anything, Marcus said. We took care of her. We were there every single day while you were off living your life. We earned that money. You cannot earn an inheritance, I said. That is not how it works. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, if you go through with this, you will never see me or Diane again. We will cut you out of our lives completely. Is that what you want? I felt tears prick my eyes, but I kept my voice steady. If that is your choice, I said. But I am not backing down. He hung up without saying goodbye. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city outside my window. Car horns, distant sirens, the rumble of the subway. I thought about my family, about how we used to be. I remembered Christmas mornings, summer vacations, birthday parties. I remembered my father teaching Marcus to drive, my mother helping Diane pick out her prom dress, the three of us kids building forts in the living room. When had it all gone wrong? When had we stopped being a family and become adversaries? The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, Linda continued to build our case. She interviewed my mother's doctors, her friends, her former co-workers at the library. Everyone painted the same picture. Dorothy Brennan had been a sharp, intelligent woman who had started to decline in her final year. She had become forgetful, easily confused, sometimes paranoid. She had accused her neighbors of stealing from her, had gotten lost driving to the grocery store, had called the police once because she thought someone was breaking into her house when it was just the mailman. And through it all, Marcus and Diane had been there, controlling her care, controlling her access to information, controlling who she saw and spoke to. One of my mother's friends, a woman named Helen who had been in her book club for 20 years, agreed to testify. I met with her and Linda at a coffee shop downtown. Helen was in her 70s, with white hair and kind eyes that reminded me of my mother. Your mother talked about you all the time, Helen told me. She was so proud of you, Claire. She used to bring in articles about your company, things you had worked on. She would show them to everyone. I felt my throat tighten. Did she ever say she was angry with me? I asked. Did she ever say I had abandoned her? Helen looked surprised. No, never. She understood that you had your own life. She used to say that was what she and your father had wanted for you to be independent and successful. What about Marcus and Diane? Linda asked. Did Dorothy ever talk about them? Helen's expression darkened. Toward the end, yes. She said they were always around, always asking her questions about her finances. She said Marcus wanted her to sell the lake house, but she did not want to. She loved that place. Your father proposed to her there. Did she sell it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Helen nodded. About a year before she died. She was very upset about it. She told me Marcus had convinced her it was necessary, that she needed the money for medical expenses. But she had good insurance. I never understood why she needed to sell. Because Marcus wanted the money, Linda said quietly. He wanted to make sure the estate was liquid, easy to divide up according to the will he was planning to have her sign. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was ugly. Marcus and Diane had systematically isolated my mother, convinced her to liquidate her assets, and then manipulated her into signing a will that benefited them. It was elder abuse, plain and simple. The day of the hearing arrived cold and gray, with a bitter wind that cut through my coat. I met Linda at the courthouse, an imposing building with marble columns and brass doors. My stomach was in knots. I had not seen Marcus or Diane since the night at Marcus's house, and I was not sure I was ready to face them. They were already in the courtroom when we arrived. Marcus sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. Diane sat behind them in the gallery, her face carefully neutral. When I walked in, neither of them looked at me. The judge was a woman in her 50s with gray streaks in her dark hair and a no-nonsense expression. She called the hearing to order, and the attorneys began their arguments. Marcus's attorney went first. He painted a picture of a devoted son who had cared for his ailing mother, who had been entrusted with her final wishes. He argued that the will Patricia Odom had prepared was outdated, that my mother had changed her mind in her final year, that she had every right to distribute her estate as she saw fit. Then it was Linda's turn. She was methodical and precise, laying out the timeline of my mother's decline, the medical evidence of her dementia, the suspicious circumstances surrounding the second will. She called Helen to testify, and the older woman described my mother's confusion and the pressure she had been under from Marcus and Diane. Then Linda called me to the stand. I walked up on shaking legs, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Linda asked me about my relationship with my mother, about how often we communicated, about the email she had sent me 8 months before her death. I told the judge about the message, about how my mother had said she needed to talk to me about important things, about how I had never gotten the chance because she had her stroke. Did your brother or sister ever tell you that your mother was experiencing cognitive decline? Linda asked. No, I said. They never told me anything. I did not even know she was seeing a neurologist. Did they tell you she was planning to change her will? No, I said again. The first I heard about any of this was after she died. Marcus's attorney cross-examined me. He tried to make me look like an absent daughter, someone who had neglected her mother. He asked about how often I visited, how many holidays I had missed, whether I had contributed to my mother's care. I answered honestly. I had not visited as often as I should have. I had missed some holidays. I had not been there for the day-to-day care. But I had called regularly. I had sent money. I had loved my mother, and she had known that. When I stepped down from the stand, I felt drained. I took my seat next to Linda and waited. The judge called for a recess. We waited in the hallway, Linda checking her phone, me pacing back and forth. I could see Marcus and Diane through the courtroom windows, their heads bent together in conversation. After 30 minutes, we were called back in. The judge looked at both sides, her expression grave. I have reviewed all the evidence presented today, she said. And I have some serious concerns about the will submitted by Mr. Marcus Brennan. The medical records clearly show that Mrs. Dorothy Brennan was experiencing significant cognitive decline at the time she allegedly executed that will. Furthermore, the circumstances surrounding its creation, including the fact that she was brought to an attorney by the very people who stood to benefit most from its terms, raised questions about undue influence. I held my breath. However, the judge continued, I also have concerns about the will submitted by Miss Patricia Odom. While it was executed at a time when Mrs. Brennan was clearly competent, it is dated 2 years before her death. It is possible that she did change her mind in the intervening time, even if the manner in which she did so was problematic. My heart sank. Therefore, the judge said, I am ordering a full investigation into this matter. I am appointing an independent executor to manage the estate while we sort this out. Both wills will remain under consideration, and I will hear additional testimony and evidence before making a final determination. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the courtroom. Linda and I walked out of the courthouse in silence. The wind had picked up, and dead leaves skittered across the sidewalk. I pulled my coat tighter around me, but I could not stop shivering. It is not over, Linda said. This is actually good news. The judge is taking this seriously. She is not just rubber-stamping Marcus's will. But she did not rule in our favor either, I said. Linda stopped walking and turned to face me. Claire, these things take time. The judge wants to be thorough. She wants to make sure she gets it right. That is a good thing. I nodded, but I felt defeated. How long will this take? I asked. Months, probably, Linda said. Maybe longer. Are you prepared for that? I did not know how to answer. Was I prepared to spend months, maybe years, fighting my own siblings? Was I prepared to spend thousands of dollars on legal fees? Was I prepared to have my family torn apart, possibly forever? But then I thought about my mother's letter, about her words. I love all three of you equally. I thought about how Marcus and Diane had betrayed her, had taken advantage of her when she was most vulnerable. I thought about how they had lied to me, had tried to cheat me out of my inheritance. Yes, I said. I am prepared. The investigation took 4 months. The court-appointed executor was a stern man named Richard Walsh who treated the whole thing like a criminal case. He interviewed everyone who had known my mother, reviewed every financial transaction she had made in the last 5 years, and hired his own medical expert to review her health records. During those 4 months, I did not speak to Marcus or Diane. I saw them once, at the grocery store. I was in the produce section, picking out apples, when I looked up and saw Diane standing by the lettuce. Our eyes met for a brief moment. She looked tired, older than I remembered. Then she turned and walked away without a word. I stood there holding an apple, feeling the smooth skin against my palm, and wondered if we would ever be able to repair what had been broken. Richard Walsh finally submitted his report to the court in early March. Linda called me as soon as she received a copy. "You need to come to my office," she said. "Right now." I drove through a late winter rain, the windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm. The sky was gray and heavy, threatening snow. When I got to Linda's office, she was waiting for me with the report spread across her desk. "Sit down," she said, and her tone made my stomach clench. I sat. "What did he find?" I asked. Linda looked at me, and I saw something in her expression that I could not quite read. Pity, maybe. Or anger. "Claire," she said, "there is a third will." "What?" I said. "That is impossible." "Walsh found it in your mother's safe deposit box," Linda said. "It is dated 6 months before she died, right after her first stroke. It was handwritten, but it was properly witnessed by 2 nurses at the hospital." I felt dizzy. "What does it say?" I asked. Linda slid a photocopy across the desk to me. I picked it up with trembling hands. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible, but it was definitely my mother's. "I, Dorothy and Brennan, being of sound mind, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. I leave my entire estate to my daughter Claire Marie Brennan. My other children, Marcus and Diane, are to receive nothing. They have betrayed my trust and taken advantage of me in my time of need. They have isolated me from Claire and have tried to manipulate me into changing my will to benefit themselves. I will not allow this. Claire is the only one of my children who has remained honest and true. She deserves everything." I stared at the words, reading them over and over. My mother had known. She had known what Marcus and Diane were doing. And she had cut them out completely. "Oh my God," I whispered. "There's more," Linda said gently. She slid another piece of paper across the desk. This was with the will. It was another letter, this one even shakier than the will. "My dearest Claire," it began. "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and I am so sorry. I am sorry that I did not tell you what was happening. I am sorry that I let Marcus and Diane convince me, even for a moment, that you did not care about me. I know the truth now. I know that they have been lying to me, manipulating me, trying to steal from you. I had my first stroke 3 days ago. The doctors say I may not have much time left. I needed to make sure that my real wishes were known. You are the daughter I am most proud of, Claire. You have always been honest, always been kind, always been true to yourself. I want you to have everything. Not because Marcus and Diane do not deserve anything, but because I need to make sure you are taken care of. I need to make sure they cannot hurt you anymore. Please forgive me for not being stronger. Please forgive me for letting them get to me. And please, if you can, try to forgive them too. They are your family, and family is all that matters in the end. I love you so much, my darling girl. I am so proud of you. Never forget that. Mom." I could not breathe. The tears came so fast and hard that I could not see. Linda came around the desk and put her hand on my shoulder, and I sobbed into my hands, my whole body shaking. My mother had known. She had known everything. And she had tried to protect me. When I finally calmed down enough to speak, I looked up at Linda. "What happens now?" I asked. Linda sat on the edge of her desk. "This will is the most recent," she said. "And it was properly executed. The witnesses have already been interviewed by Walsh, and they confirmed that your mother was lucid when she signed it. She knew what she was doing." "So I get everything," I said. "Yes," Linda said. "Unless Marcus and Diane contest it. And I think they will." She was right. Within a week, Marcus and Diane filed a motion to invalidate the third will. They argued that my mother had not been of sound mind, that she had been influenced by pain medication, that the will was the product of a confused and frightened woman who did not understand what she was doing. The judge scheduled another hearing. This time, the courtroom was packed. Word had gotten out about the case, and there were reporters in the back row, their notebooks open, their pens poised. Marcus and Diane's attorney called the nurses who had witnessed the will. He tried to get them to say that my mother had been confused, that she had been heavily medicated, that she had not really understood what she was signing. But the nurses were unshakable. She was clear, one of them testified. She knew exactly what she wanted. She asked us to witness her will, and we did. She was upset, yes, but she was not confused. The other nurse nodded in agreement. She told us that her son and daughter had been trying to take advantage of her, she said. She said she needed to make sure her other daughter was protected. She was very determined. Then Linda called a handwriting expert who testified that the will was definitely written by my mother, that there were no signs of forgery or coercion. She called my mother's neurologist, who testified that while my mother had been experiencing cognitive decline, she had periods of lucidity, especially in the days immediately following her stroke when she would have been on high alert. Finally, Linda called me to the stand again. This time, Marcus's attorney was more aggressive. He accused me of manipulating my mother, of turning her against her other children, of being greedy and selfish. I sat there and took it, answering his questions calmly and honestly. No, I had not known about the third will. No, I had not asked my mother to cut out Marcus and Diane. No, I did not think I deserved the entire estate. Then what do you want? The attorney asked. If you do not think you deserve everything, what are you doing here? I looked at Marcus and Diane, sitting at the table across from me. Marcus would not meet my eyes, but Diane was staring at me with an expression of pure hatred. I want the truth to come out, I said. I want everyone to know what they did to our mother. I want them to be held accountable. The attorney smirked. So this is about revenge, he said. No, I said. This is about justice. The judge called for another recess. We waited for 2 hours this time. I sat in the hallway with Linda, neither of us speaking. I watched people come and go, lawyers and clients and court staff, all of them caught up in their own dramas. Finally, we were called back in. The judge looked tired, her face drawn. She shuffled through the papers in front of her, then looked up at all of us. This has been one of the most difficult cases I have ever presided over, she said. It is clear that Dorothy Brennan was a woman who loved her children very much. It is also clear that in her final months, she was caught in the middle of a family conflict that caused her great pain. I have reviewed all the evidence, all the testimony, all 3 wills. And I have come to a decision. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone in the courtroom must be able to hear it. The will dated 6 months before Mrs. Brennan's death, the one leaving her entire estate to Claire Brennan, is valid, the judge said. The medical evidence shows that Mrs. Brennan was capable of executing a will at that time. The witnesses were credible and consistent in their testimony. And most importantly, the letter that accompanied the will makes it clear that Mrs. Brennan understood exactly what she was doing and why. I heard Diane gasp behind me. However, the judge continued, I am troubled by the circumstances that led to this will being created. It is clear that there was significant family discord, and that Mrs. Brennan felt betrayed by two of her children. While I cannot and will not second-guess her decisions, I do think that this situation could have been avoided if there had been better communication and more transparency. The judge looked directly at Marcus and Diane. Mr. Brennan, Ms. Brennan, she said, your actions in isolating your mother from your sister and in attempting to manipulate her into changing her will were reprehensible. While I cannot prove that you committed a crime, I can say with certainty that you violated your mother's trust and caused her great distress in her final months. You should be ashamed. Then she looked at me. Ms. Brennan, she said, you are entitled to your mother's estate as she wished. However, I would encourage you to consider whether this is truly what you want. Money cannot replace family, and the damage that has been done here may be irreparable. The gavel came down. It is so ordered, the judge said. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed forward, shouting questions. Marcus's attorney was on his feet, arguing for an appeal. Diane was crying, her face in her hands. Marcus just sat there, staring straight ahead, his face blank. Linda grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the exit. We need to get you out of here, she said. We pushed through the crowd and out into the hallway. The noise followed us, echoing off the marble walls. We did not stop until we were outside, standing on the courthouse steps in the cold March air. You won, Linda said. It is over. But it did not feel like winning. It felt like losing, like everything had been lost. My mother was gone. My family was destroyed. And I was left with a house full of memories and a bank account full of money that I had never wanted. I went home that night and sat in the darkness of my apartment. I did not turn on the lights. I just sat there, listening to the sounds of the city, thinking about everything that had happened. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was Rachel, my best friend. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. And again. Finally, I answered. Claire, she said, her voice full of concern. I saw the news. Are you okay? I do not know, I said honestly. Do you want me to come over? She asked. No, I said. I just need to be alone right now. Okay, she said. But call me if you need anything. Anything at all. I promised I would, and we hung up. I sat there for a while longer, then I got up and went to my bedroom. I opened the closet and pulled out a box from the top shelf. Inside were old photos, letters, mementos from my childhood. I found a picture of the four of us, me and Marcus and Diane and our parents. We were at the lake house, standing on the dock. I could not have been more than 10 years old. We were all smiling, our arms around each other, the sun setting behind us. We looked happy. We looked like a family. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to remember what it had felt like to be that little girl, to have a family that loved each other, to believe that nothing could ever tear us apart. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and logistics. The estate had to be settled, accounts had to be transferred, the house had to be dealt with. Richard Walsh, the court-appointed executor, handled most of it, but I still had to sign documents, make decisions, answer questions. I went to my parents' house one last time before it was officially transferred to me. It was a Saturday morning, early, the sun just starting to rise. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, looking at the house where I had grown up. The paint was peeling a little around the windows. The gutters needed cleaning. The lawn needed mowing. It looked tired, neglected, like it was morning too. I let myself in with the key I had since I was 16. The house smelled stale, like it had been closed up for too long. Dust motes floated in the sunlight streaming through the windows. I walked through the room slowly, touching things, remembering. The living room where we had opened Christmas presents. The kitchen where my mother had taught me to bake cookies. The dining room where we had eaten Sunday dinners. My old bedroom, still decorated with posters from high school, the bed covered with a quilt my grandmother had made. I ended up in my parents' bedroom. It felt wrong to be there, invasive somehow. But I needed to see it. I needed to understand. The room was neat, the bed made with military precision the way my mother had always done it. Her reading glasses were on the nightstand, next to a book she would never finish. My father's watch was in a dish on the dresser, even though he had been gone for 3 years. I opened the closet. My mother's clothes still hung there, dresses and blouses and sweaters, all organized by color. I touched the blue cardigan, felt the soft wool beneath my fingers, and suddenly I could smell her perfume, that light floral scent she had worn for as long as I could remember. I pulled the cardigan off the hanger and held it to my face, breathing in deeply. And then I was crying again, great heaving sobs that shook my whole body. I sank to the floor, clutching the cardigan, and let myself grieve. Not just for my mother, but for everything we had lost. For the family we used to be. For the innocence of believing that love was enough to keep us together. I do not know how long I sat there. Eventually, the tears stopped. I wiped my face with the cardigan, then carefully folded it and set it aside. I would keep it, I decided. I would keep something of hers, something that smelled like her, something I could hold when I missed her. I stood up and looked around the room one more time. That was when I noticed the box on the top shelf of the closet. It was a shoebox, old and battered, pushed far back into the corner. I pulled it down and opened it. Inside were more letters. Dozens of them, all addressed to my mother, all from me. Every card I had sent her, every note, every postcard from business trips and vacations. She had kept them all. I picked up one at random and opened it. It was a birthday card from 5 years ago. "Happy birthday, Mom," I had written. "I am sorry I cannot be there to celebrate with you. Work has been crazy. But I am thinking of you and I love you so much. I will call you this weekend. Love, Claire." I had called that weekend. We had talked for an hour about her garden and my job and the book she was reading. It had been a good conversation, easy and comfortable. I had hung up feeling connected to her, feeling like even though we were far apart, we were still close. And she had kept the card. She had kept all of them. I sat on the edge of the bed and went through the box, reading every letter, every card. Some of them were funny, some were serious, some were just quick notes to say I was thinking of her. But all of them were full of love. All of them proved that I had not abandoned her, that I had stayed in touch, that I had cared. Why had Marcus and Diane told her otherwise? Why had they tried to convince her that I did not love her? I knew the answer, of course. They had wanted the money. They had seen an opportunity and they had taken it, even if it meant hurting our mother, even if it meant destroying our family. I put the letters back in the box and took it with me when I left. I also took the cardigan, and a photo album, and my mother's favorite coffee mug. Small things, things that mattered more than money ever could. As I was locking the front door, I heard a car pull up. I turned and saw Marcus getting out of his truck. He looked terrible, like he had not slept in days. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair uncombed. He walked toward me slowly, his hands in his pockets. We stood there on the front porch, not speaking, just looking at each other. The morning was getting warmer, the sun climbing higher in the sky. I could hear birds singing in the trees, the sound of a lawnmower a few houses down. I did not mean for it to go this far, Marcus finally said. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. But it did, I said. He nodded. I know. And I am sorry. I am so sorry, Claire. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to forgive him, to hug him, to tell him that we could fix this. But I could not. The hurt was too deep, the betrayal too complete. Why did you do it? I asked. Why did you lie to her? Why did you try to turn her against me? Marcus looked down at his feet. I do not know, he said. I guess I was jealous. You always had it so easy. You went to college, got a great job, made something of yourself. Diane and I, we stayed here. We worked regular jobs, struggled to make ends meet. And Mom and Dad were always so proud of you. It was always Claire this, Claire that. Like Diane and I did not matter. That is not true, I said. They were proud of all of us. Maybe, Marcus said. But it did not feel that way. And when Dad died and left everything to Mom, I started thinking about the future. About what would happen when she was gone. About how you would probably get more because you were the favorite. I was not the favorite, I said. Marcus looked up at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. Yes, you were, he said. You just did not know it. I did not know what to say to that. We stood there in silence for a long moment. Diane and I, we started talking to Mom about the will, Marcus continued. At first, it was innocent. We just wanted to make sure everything was fair. But then she got sick, and she started getting confused, and it was so easy to convince her of things. To tell her that you did not call as much as you used to, that you had forgotten her birthday, that you were too busy for her. And she believed us. She actually believed us. His voice broke on the last word. And then she had the stroke, and we thought we had won. We thought she had signed the will that gave us most of the estate. But then she wrote that last will, the one that gave you everything. And I realized that she had known all along what we were doing. That we had not fooled her at all. That we had just hurt her. Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I have to live with that for the rest of my life, he said. I have to live with knowing that I hurt our mother in her final months. That I made her last days miserable. That I destroyed our family for money that I did not even need. I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe the beginning of understanding. What do you want from me, Marcus? I asked. He shook his head. Nothing, he said. I do not want anything. I just wanted you to know that I am sorry. And that I know I do not deserve your forgiveness. But I hope that someday, maybe, we can find a way back to each other. Because you are my sister, and I love you, and I miss you. He turned and walked back to his truck. I watched him drive away, standing there on the porch with the box of letters in my arms. I did not know if I would ever be able to forgive Marcus and Diane. I did not know if our family could ever be repaired. But I knew that I had to try. Because my mother had been right. Family was all that mattered in the end. I sold my parents' house 3 months later. I could not live there, could not bear to walk through those rooms every day, haunted by memories and ghosts. A young couple bought it, newlyweds with big plans for renovations. They were excited, full of hope and dreams. I was happy for them. I used some of the money to pay off my student loans and my car. I put the rest in savings, not sure what I wanted to do with it. It felt wrong to spend it, like blood money somehow. I kept working at my job, kept living in my apartment above the bakery. Life went on, the way it always does, even when you think it cannot possibly continue. 6 months after the court ruling, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Diane. I almost threw it away without opening it, but something made me hesitate. I sat down at my kitchen table, the envelope in my hands, and stared at it for a long time. Finally, I opened it. "Dear Claire," it began. "I do not expect you to read this. I do not expect you to respond. But I needed to write it anyway, needed to try to explain, even though I know there is no explanation that will make what I did okay. I was wrong. Marcus was wrong. We were selfish and cruel, and we hurt Mom when she needed us most. We hurt you. We destroyed our family. And for what? Money? Security? It seems so stupid now, so pointless. I think about Mom every day. I think about the look on her face when she realized what we were doing. I think about how betrayed she must have felt. I think about that last will she wrote, cutting us out completely, and I know that we deserved it. We deserved worse. I do not know if you can ever forgive us. I do not know if I can ever forgive myself. But I want you to know that I am sorry. I am so sorry. You were always the best of us, Claire. The kindest, the most honest, the most true. Mom knew that. That is why she left everything to you. Not because she loved you more, but because she trusted you. Because she knew you would do the right thing. I hope you are doing well. I hope you are happy. And I hope that someday, maybe, we can talk again. Not about the money or the will or any of that. Just talk, the way we used to when we were kids. I miss you, little sister. Love, Diane." I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in the box with my mother's letters and cards. I was not ready to forgive them yet. Maybe I never would be. But I was ready to stop being angry. I was ready to let go of the bitterness and the hurt and the sense of betrayal. Because holding on to all of that was only hurting me. I thought about what the judge had said. Money cannot replace family. She had been right. I had won the legal battle, but I had lost something far more valuable in the process. That night, I sat down and wrote 2 letters. One to Marcus, one to Diane. I told them that I was not ready to see them yet, but that I was willing to try. That I thought maybe, with time and effort and a lot of honesty, we might be able to rebuild something. Not what we had before, that was gone forever. But something new, something different. Something real. I told them that I was going to donate half of the estate to charity, to causes that our mother had cared about. The library where she had worked. The animal shelter where she had volunteered. the scholarship fund at the local high school. I told them that I did not want the money, had never wanted it. That all I had ever wanted was the truth. And I told them that I loved them, despite everything. Because they were my family, and family was all that mattered in the end. I mailed the letters the next morning. I did not know if Marcus and Diane would respond. I did not know if we would ever be able to sit in the same room together without the weight of what had happened crushing us. But I had taken the first step, and that was something. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something told me I should. Claire, a voice said. It was Diane. Her voice was tentative, uncertain. I got your letter. I sat down on my couch, my heart pounding. Hi, I said. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Thank you, she finally said. For writing. For giving us a chance. I do not know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I know, Diane said. I do not expect you to. But I want to try to make things right. Or at least, less wrong. We talked for an hour. It was awkward and painful, full of long silences and careful words. But it was a start. We agreed to meet for coffee the following week, just the two of us. No lawyers, no mediators, no agenda. Just two sisters trying to find their way back to each other. Marcus called the next day. His conversation was shorter, more stilted. He was not as good with words as Diane. But he said he wanted to try too. He said he would do whatever it took to make amends. The coffee meeting with Diane was harder than I expected. We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. I got there first and sat by the window, watching people walk by, trying to calm my nerves. When Diane arrived, she looked different. Smaller somehow, less sure of herself. She had always been the confident one, the one who knew what she wanted and went after it. But now she looked lost. We ordered coffee and sat across from each other, not speaking. The silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, Diane spoke. I do not know how to do this, she said. I do not know how to fix what I broke. I do not know either, I admitted. But I think we have to try. For Mom. Diane nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I miss her so much, she said. And I hate that the last months of her life were so awful. I hate that we did that to her. Why did you? I asked. I still do not understand. You did not need the money. You both have good jobs, nice houses. Why was it so important to you? Diane looked down at her coffee cup, tracing the rim with her finger. I think it was about more than money, she said quietly. It was about feeling valued. About feeling like we mattered. You were always the special one, Claire. The smart one, the successful one. Marcus and I, we were just ordinary. And I think we wanted to prove that we were worth something too. That we deserved to be rewarded for staying, for being there. But I did not leave because I did not love you, I said. I left because I wanted to build a life. That is what Mom and Dad wanted for me. For all of us. I know that now, Diane said. But at the time, it felt like abandonment. It felt like you thought you were too good for us, for this town, for this life. And that hurt. I reached across the table and took her hand. I never thought that, I said. I never felt that way. I love you, Diane. I love Marcus. I love this town. I just needed to find my own path. Diane squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her face. I am so sorry, she whispered. I am so sorry. We sat there for a long time, holding hands across the table, crying together. Other customers glanced at us, probably wondering what drama was unfolding. But I did not care. This was my sister, and we were finding our way back to each other. Over the next few months, we met regularly. Sometimes it was just Diane and me. Sometimes Marcus joined us. The conversations were not always easy. There were arguments, accusations, more tears. But slowly, painfully, we started to rebuild trust. I learned things about my siblings that I had never known. Marcus told me about his struggles with depression after our father died, how he had felt like he had to be the man of the family, how the pressure had nearly crushed him. Diane told me about her miscarriage 3 years ago, how she had felt like a failure, how she had been jealous of my career because at least I had something to show for my life. And I told them about my own struggles. About how lonely I had been in the city, how I had thrown myself into work because I did not know how else to cope with the distance from my family. About how guilty I had felt for not being there more, how I had convinced myself that phone calls and cards were enough when I knew they were not. We were all broken, I realized. We had all been hurting, all been struggling. And instead of supporting each other, we had let our pain drive us apart. 1 year after my mother's death, the 3 of us went to the cemetery together. It was a beautiful October day, the kind of day my mother had loved. The leaves were turning, brilliant reds and golds against the blue sky. The air was crisp and clean, smelling of autumn. We stood at her grave, the 3 of us side by side. The headstone was simple, just her name and dates and the words beloved wife and mother. My father's grave was next to hers, their stones matching. I brought flowers, white roses, her favorite. Marcus brought a small American flag, because our father had been a veteran. Diane brought a book, one of the mysteries our mother had loved to read. We stood there in silence for a while, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Then Marcus spoke. I am sorry, Mom, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I am sorry for what I did. I am sorry for hurting you. I hope you can forgive me. Diane nodded, wiping her eyes. Me too, she whispered. I am so sorry. I knelt down and placed the roses on the grave. I love you, Mom, I said. Thank you for everything. Thank you for loving me, for believing in me, for protecting me even when you were gone. I promise I will take care of Marcus and Diane. I promise I will keep our family together. We stayed there for a long time, the 3 of us, saying goodbye. When we finally left, we walked out together, arms around each other, supporting each other the way we should have all along. The healing was not instant. It took time, effort, patience. There were setbacks, moments when old resentments flared up, when the hurt felt too deep to overcome. But we kept trying. We kept showing up for each other. I used the money from the estate the way I had promised. Half went to charity. The other half I split 3 ways, giving Marcus and Diane their share despite what the wolves said. They protested at first, said they did not deserve it. But I insisted. This was not about what they deserved. This was about what was right. Marcus used his share to pay off his mortgage and start a college fund for his kids. Diane used hers to go back to school, to finally get the degree she had always wanted. I used mine to start a foundation in my mother's name, one that provided scholarships to students from our hometown who wanted to pursue higher education. We started having family dinners again, once a month at first, then more often. We celebrated holidays together, birthdays, ordinary Sundays. We rebuilt the traditions that had been lost, created new ones. We learned to talk to each other, really talk, about our feelings and our fears and our hopes. It was not the same as it had been before. We could not go back to that innocent time when we were children and everything was simple. Too much had happened, too much had been broken. But in some ways, it was better. We knew each other now, really knew each other. We had seen each other at our worst and chosen to love each other anyway. 2 years after my mother's death, I was cleaning out my apartment, getting ready to move into a house I had bought on the edge of town. I found the box of letters, the ones my mother had kept, the ones I had taken from her house. I sat down on the floor, surrounded by packing boxes, and went through them again. I read every card, every note, every postcard. And I realized something. My mother had known all along that I loved her. She had kept these letters as proof, as a reminder to herself when Marcus and Diane tried to convince her otherwise. She had known the truth. And in the end, she had made sure that truth prevailed. I thought about the alternate will, the one Marcus had tried to file. The one that would have given him and Diane most of the estate. I thought about how close they had come to getting away with it. If my mother had not written that final will, if she had not left that letter explaining everything, I might never have known what they had done. But she had known. She had seen through their lies and manipulation. And she had protected me, even from beyond the grave. I put the letters back in the box and set it aside. I would keep them forever, I decided. They were proof of my mother's love, proof that I had not failed her, proof that our relationship had been real and strong and true. That evening, Marcus and Diane came over to help me pack. We ordered pizza and worked together, wrapping dishes in newspaper, boxing up books, labeling everything. We laughed and joked and told stories about our childhood. It felt normal, comfortable, like we were a family again. As we were finishing up, Diane found a photo album I had not seen before. It must have been mixed in with my mother's things. She opened it, and we gathered around to look. The photos were old, from when we were kids. There we were at the beach, building sandcastles. There we were at Christmas, opening presents. There we were in the backyard, playing in the sprinkler. In every photo, we were together, smiling, happy. "Look at us," Marcus said softly. "We were so young. So innocent." "We can be that again," I said. "Not innocent, maybe. But together. Happy." Diane looked at me, her eyes shining with tears. "Do you really think so?" she asked. I nodded. "I do. It will not be easy. It will take work. But I think we can do it. I think Mom would want us to." Marcus put his arm around my shoulders. "She would," he agreed. "She always wanted us to stick together. To take care of each other." We stood there, the three of us, looking at those old photos, remembering who we used to be and imagining who we could become. The past could not be changed. The hurt could not be erased. But the future was still unwritten. And we had a choice about how to write it. I chose forgiveness. I chose family. I chose love. And in the end, that was what my mother had wanted all along. Not for me to have her money or her house or her possessions, but for me to have my family. For all of us to have each other. The alternate will, the one Marcus and Diane had created, had been a lie. But it had also been a test. A test of our family, of our love, of our ability to overcome betrayal and hurt and find our way back to each other. We had passed that test. Barely, painfully, but we had passed. And now, standing in my apartment surrounded by boxes and memories and my brother and sister, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that we could heal. Hope that we could move forward. Hope that we could honor our mother's memory by being the family she had always believed we could be. The sun was setting outside my window, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, the kind of sunset my mother would have loved. I imagined her watching us from wherever she was, smiling, knowing that her children had finally found their way back to each other. "Thank you, Mom," I whispered. "Thank you for everything." And in the fading light, surrounded by my family, I felt her presence. Not gone, not really. Just changed, transformed into something that lived in our hearts and our memories and the love we had for each other. Nobody had imagined what would happen when my parents' will was revealed. Nobody had imagined the betrayal, the lies, the pain. But nobody had imagined the healing either. The forgiveness. The redemption. Life is full of surprises, my mother used to say. Some good, some bad. But all of them teach us something. She had been right. This whole terrible, painful experience had taught me something invaluable. It had taught me that family is not about blood or obligation or inheritance. It is about choice. About choosing to love, to forgive, to stay, even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. And I chose my family. Every day, I chose them. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because they were mine, and I was theirs, and that was all that mattered.